Good morning, everyone. Good day, wherever you are. And a huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on how can AI actually help your teams. This is a timely discussion brought to you by Lead Dev, created in partnership with Harness. Our webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, and after that, both myself as well as the panelists we have with us today will head over to the Lead Dev Slack channel to answer any of your follow-up questions. That's going to be the continuous learning channel, so you can go ahead and join if you haven't already. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so I encourage you to submit those through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them if we can towards the end. So with that, let's get started with some introductions. I'm Aralee McSweeney. You'll hear a bit more about me, and today I'll be joined by Wenji, Ina, Fagani, and Martin. So Wenji, would you like to tell us more about yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Wenji. Right now, I work at Grammarly as a senior machine learning engineer and also leading the effort of ML in my project. And before that, I've been working in the machine learning field as either research engineer or ML engineer for about 10 years across different kind of industries, involving in different technologies like NLP, computer vision, recommender system, and all that. Beyond work, I'm a big advocate for women in AI and also community works, to connect people in the tech world. So I also organize my own meetup groups in Toronto every 2 months. The organization is called TAPNet, Toronto AI Practitioners Network. So very excited to be here and see everyone. Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you. Fagani.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I am Fagani. I am working as an engineering lead at DataRobot. Today, I'm joining Lead Dev from Germany, Nuremberg. I have hands-on experience on creating cloud SaaS solutions, infrastructure platforms for developers. And yeah, that's me.
Very succinct. Thank you. Ina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ina, and I am part of Google Cloud. I lead engineering for a database migration service. We help customers migrate their data from anywhere, on-prem, other clouds, to Google Cloud. And what we can see is one of the big reasons for speeding up this migration and modernization is the abundance of generative AI tools and services in any of the public clouds. In my day job, we actually integrated LLMs or generative AI inside our product for developers. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Martin, how about you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Martin. I'm a field CTO at Harness. Been here coming on for about 9 months, but previously I worked as a platform engineering director. Particularly excited to be here today. We are spending a lot of time adding AI into places that make sense. So it's a really insightful discussion for me. So looking forward to it.
Amazing. And there you have it. These are our panelists. I'm Aralee McSweeney. I'm an engineering director at Etsy, where I've been leading transformative product enabling projects for the past 6 years. I'm really driven by curiosity, Etsy's mission to keep commerce human, but I'm also excited about DEI and as well as responsible AI. I'm most interested in tackling complex problems. I love enabling people and teams to do their best work. So with that, why don't we get into our discussion? If you're tuning into this webinar, then it's because you're looking for clarity and more thoughtful discussion to help you sort through the multitude of AI solutions available in the industry today. And we all know AI can be a pretty divisive topic amongst developer teams. While a large percentage of engineering teams are already using generative AI to some extent and benefiting from those implementations, a significant percentage of development teams are still skeptical regarding the efficacy of all of these tools. So today we're going to talk through the practical application of these tools, how to identify which tools are worth investing in, how to have meaningful conversations about AI, especially with your non-technical stakeholders, and using AI tools at scale. Let's dive right in. So our first question reads, with the plethora of AI tools available on the market, how do you identify which ones are worth investing time and resources in? What are the key indicators that you look for? And I'd like to start off with Martin.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of things here. I mean, generally, we're, looking for things that really help us make people's jobs easier, that take away some of those things that are difficult for people to do. So, the value pieces we're looking at is, where can AI take away things that are normally complex or frustrating, and kind of just simplify that whole process in terms of that, the SDLC overall, and we're all familiar with copilots and, the kind of generating code, but, it's also where else can it help? And the way that we really try and measure that is, is it actually reducing the time that it takes for somebody to achieve the goal of, whether that's developing and delivering code, is it getting them faster to that deployment? Is it accelerating their testing? Is it, so it's really digging into all those smaller steps in the SDLC rather than the big ones to really kind of see where it's driving benefit and value.
Thank you for that. Wenji, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on my side, I think right now a lot of tools are built based on generative AI technologies, but the how sophisticated the technology is or how good the performance is a question mark to me. So usually I like to check the company or the vendor who is providing this type of technology. Are they published in generative AI field, and what the performance of their core models compare with the other ones. So definitely we're looking for the company who is leading in the field. And the second one is how much attention they put into privacy and security part. Because right now a lot of the generative AI tools requires knowing some of the data inside your code base or inside your documents in order for them to provide context-aware answers. So we are very cautious in terms of what tools to introduce and what kind of risk we're exposing ourselves to when we're introducing another tool. Taking a look at what we have. So definitely, their effort and how much they put into making sure this is secure, matters a lot to us.
Thank you. And these are really important considerations, especially because so many of the tools are so new. Working in tech, it's been typical for tools to be on the market for 5 to 7 years, but a lot of new tools are kind of flooded into the market over the past 1 to 2 years. Do you have any additional thoughts you'd like to share based on that context?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot. And actually following on from that, it really is difficult to try and pick out the right space and the right values for them. I think almost following on from that privacy thing too, that's kind of critical. I know we work with a lot of regulated environments, and those regulated environments, they require a lot of approvals to get them through to that stage of being able to use them. And I think that kind of comes back to what you were saying at the start around that. So I think, that validation around where they are and how the models are built and what they're doing, is critical. It's critical to make sure that you can use it in the environments that you're working in, because so many of the environments are becoming regulated, even that weren't regulated before.
Thank you so much. I think it's really interesting to dive deeper into some of maybe the practical experiences and scenarios that you've all have seen. And so I want to prompt the panel. Can you share any specific scenarios where AI tools were just not as useful as they were marketed? Perhaps they were even counterproductive to the software development process. What lessons did you specifically learn from these experiences? And Ina, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. So we can see that many of the AI tools today, they come in an assistive manner. So let's say they generate code, and then we need software engineers to actually review that code before it goes into production. So what we can see is that from a very, very creative process of writing software, now many software engineers are shifting to be code reviewers, reviewing code written by AI. And as we can see from a lot of research, this is something that engineers like to do much less. So I think this is something to think about. I do think that where we are today, the assistive AI is here to stay. And I would actually encourage folks not to bypass this person code review and to continue using, at the moment, the generative AI tools as a suggestion, not just as a I'm feeling lucky and just auto approve.
Very insightful. Fagani, how about you?
Yeah, there are many examples, but I can focus on two main ones maybe for today. So today, at least till the day of today, the AI systems we have, the generative AI and LLMs, when we talk about them and when we check their architecture, they are mainly like pattern makers. They are being trained on some data and they are, kind of, from very high view, they are just making some patterns. And code generation, documentation generation, all test generation, all of these are pattern making. And this is biased towards some specific, programming styles, conventions, some specific guides based on their training data. So when we just start to use them as it is and try to put into our day-to-day work immediately, we see issues with this bias. We see that it doesn't match with our, styles we have, our practices. Actually, it may be good and bad thing. So we may learn from it and improve our style, our conventions, and so on. But in the meantime, if we have something figured out works for us, for a specific team or organization, it may cause a lot of problems and, drag us back. And the second thing is when we look at the many AI tools out there being, marketized today, we see they are focused on generating code or documentation or unit tests, like generating something. And code itself, when we generate code, it becomes a liability. And when we have AI primarily being used to generate code only, this may lead to big problems because like overall software development is bigger than writing code or writing documentation. Like writing code is the easiest part of the software development, platform engineering, infrastructure engineering, and everything. So that's, I believe, where we see issues, when we create tons of code and we believe that, okay, we are getting faster or productive. Actually, maybe if we really have a look into them, we might not be getting that much productive because we should be careful with, how this code will be understanding. If the one after us, the other team members, the other people out there, which will read our code, try to understand it, they should be able to easily understand it. And yeah.
So I think that that's a great point of view. I think we've dug into like some of the technical aspects around this. Martin, I'm curious to hear your perspective around some of maybe the non-technical aspects, securing business code, over-promising. Where have these tools let you down in the past?
So there is a little bit of that. I think I think that there's always that promise of, it's going to make you 20%, 30%, 40% more efficient if you use those tools. Actually, some of the challenges around that really come from, okay, so you've made one bit faster, but have you made all the bits faster, right? I actually heard an analogy the other day of saying, it's no good if you have like a water pump that can pump like 1,000 gallons a second if you've got a garden hose that is this big, right? So, it's actually enabling that across the piece because actually what you kind of see is that if you're generating more code, that's great. That's actually fabulous, right? You're saying I'm building more features for my customers, they can be happy. But actually, I still can't get it out the door. I need to actually enhance all the processes that come afterwards, right? So I need to make sure that my system testing and my deployment processes and my environments and my resilience and my monitoring and my synthetic checks and everything else that comes after, those need to be able to be generated and tested and validated and make the pipe bigger so that you get that full benefit from the end to end. And that's quite often where you kind of get that overpromise of it's going to be fabulous, but actually you can't fix one bit in isolation. You have to consider it as part of that whole overall whole. And you know, and it's a cost, right? Those tools cost money. You're investing in them. I just think sometimes that the investment needs to be bigger than you think.
I think that's a great point of view, particularly the fact that you have to look at the entire system and how the entire system will be affected. And I feel like that's a really nice lead into our next question, because as we look at our systems holistically, it does involve both technical and non-technical collaborators. And so I'd definitely be curious to hear more about how can managers and developers have meaningful and productive conversations about AI toolings and the need and the use cases for these tools, particularly in collaboration with non-technical stakeholders. So Wenji, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, on my side, as a technical practitioners, I constantly have to have these conversations with, business lead or leadership in the company to convince them what is, working and what is not. And I find that during my communications, instead of diving deep into the technical details, data has been a more like universal language that both sides are able to understand. So it's more straightforward to show them some numbers regarding about how well the model is performing, what where there's a lagging behind and we need to pay more attention to. But with that said, there are some complications in terms of showing numbers or showing performance related to generative AI tools, because compared with other like AI models that probably just do classifications or regressions, so you can just show them accuracy or recalls, these more commonly understandable terminologies. When we are talking about evaluation of AI tools, especially powered by generative AI, even the academic world or the industry world haven't reached to a conclusion in terms of what are the most stabilized way of doing these evaluations. So right now, I find myself and my team constantly put a lot of effort into exploring what's the best way of evaluating some of the Gen AI tools, and even implementing our own evaluation metrics just to make sure our evaluation is more aligned with the human evaluation. We can convince the leadership that we are doing something meaningful that represent the performance.
Absolutely. Data is definitely key. It does have a way of aligning everyone towards success. Ina, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it twofold. So first of all, I think it's very important to align on the problem, right? Like what are the problems where generative AI could be a solution? So once we align on the problem, and it could be developer velocity, it could be maintaining old code, it could be innovation, et cetera, et cetera. So once we align on a problem, then it helps to bring generative AI as a solution, sometimes not the only solution. So that's one, really, really helps with talking to like non-engineers that might be skeptical, might not be as excited about, adopting new scary tooling. So, and the other end of this conversation is to be really, really clear about expectations of quality. I think that as software engineers, we're really geared towards like 100% correct, or I don't know, 4 nines, 5 nines. Now with generative AI, the evaluation is of a lower bar of quality today. So I think it's really, really important to set this expectation. For example, as Fagani mentioned, if we want to adjust some tool for our own coding standards, right? So we're going to build some tool for our organization. It's not going to be 100% correct. And that's okay. So I think it's really important to decide on the bar, on the quality bar, either for foundational models where we are okay to adopt, or for tooling we are going to build for our own organizations, for engineers, and maybe not for engineers.
Absolutely. I think those are really great points to raise. Thank you for jumping in on that, articulating the problem, aligning on expectations of quality, and using data. Amazing. So I'll turn now to you, Fagani. In your experience, what are the biggest challenges you've seen when integrating AI tools at scale within an organization? And how can we effectively address these challenges?
Yeah. So in organizations where we do software development, each software development team is the smallest unit of the software ownership. So each piece of the software inside the organization is, owned by one team. These teams are named different, like there can be platform engineering teams. Like if you are doing microservices, you might have more than 5-10 teams, each responsible for different unit of this. And we need to understand the needs of different groups. So there might be specific groups that doing CRUD-like applications, or they are using programming languages that has more boilerplate kind of stuff. When this is part of the life cycle of these teams, you can maybe easily integrate AI, generative AI, into their day-to-day work, and you can see improvements. But there might be teams that they are not interested, or maybe they are doing something new, something creative, and they don't really benefit from generative AI because the boilerplates or CRUD-like things or well-known standards are not part of their day-to-day work, because they are inventing something new. They are trying to make something totally new that never been there before, or there's not enough data in the generative AI when it's trained about this. So it comes down to understanding the needs of different groups and asking questions. For example, you can look out there. There are several researchers published by Google, Microsoft, and some other universities even, like what do developers want from AI, how they can benefit. And when you look to the first 3-4 top items, they are very close across different big companies. But what I really like in this research is, they are recommending that, also they are doing by themselves, obviously, that ask questions, ask like, are AI tools really increasing the speed or the productivity of your development teams? Do they really improve the code quality? Or as I said before, they just, improves the amount of the code, but actually decreases the quality? Or do they really help development teams to create creative solutions or not? And when you ask these questions to different groups in your organization, different software teams, you may get different answers, and that's totally normal. That's, I believe, how we can and should approach. That was my experience. Some teams really can benefit from it, some teams just not, and maybe they shouldn't even use it because that's how they work, that's how they are being productive. So I think we definitely need to ask some questions, address these questions, and based on that, identify what promising opportunities are out there from generative AI, and if we can use them.
Thank you. Wenji, how about you? What are your thoughts?
That's a very interesting question. I would probably want to talk about this question in two parts. The first one is, will the company even consider about using AI tools, or are they comfortable adopting it? Because last weekend I was in another AI panel discussion, and from the audience, there's a couple of people asked that question, like their company are in the more traditional industry, or their CEOs are more like using the old technologies and more comfortable with that. So it's really hard for the engineers and the pioneers in the AI field to convince their leadership that AI is a good thing to explore, especially, with all the skepticals, happening online, discussing about, the hallucination problems and the privacy problems around it. So I think I was lucky that I was working in the tech field and working in, AI labs. So leaders are more supportive naturally for us to explore this path. But I would recognize that this is not the case for everybody. And the other one is regarding about same consideration, like highly regulated industries. So for industries like finance or law related field, usually if you want to adopting a tool or if you want to launch a feature powered by some models, there is a very long and a cautious validation and regulation happening in order for them to understand what are the risks they're exposing themselves to. And just like I mentioned, like evaluation of Gen AI tool right now is not at a very mature stage. And there's also policymakers discussing many things around AI. Like, for example, what is actually responsible AI, right? So everybody has their own definition. There's no one term, one definition that fits everybody's understanding, or the discussion about copyright. If my company is going to use Gen AI generating something, does it belong to my company or does it belong to somewhere else? So these are still ongoing. So I think once the policymakers works together with the researchers, making sure it's more clear to everybody the definition and how should we execute, the more highly regulated industry will be more ready to consider and incorporating the AI tools to their day-to-day usage. And the second big component, is regarding about whether the company, if the company wants to use AI tools, whether they're ready. So in my case, I think I find myself considering about the cost a lot compared with before, because now it's not a one-off thing. So it's AI, API call based. So and right now even the cost is lowering a lot. It's still quite a lot if you want to use it in a large scale. So this is more important than before ever. Yeah.
Got it. So I think what I'm hearing from you and Fagani is we need to think about how work happens across the organization to avoid duplication of efforts and to truly understand the needs of each group so that we can meet business expectations. And then specifically from you, Wenji, which I did appreciate that the flip side of the coin, right? What are the risks that we have to manage? Some companies form risk steering committees or oversight committees to help articulate that. Some companies also take it upon themselves, like the engineers do surface up curiosity and requests to leverage Gen AI tools, but it's really on the business leaders to articulate, well, what kinds of problems do we want to leverage Gen AI for? And I think that's super insightful and really important to highlight. There's two sides of the coin here. Okay. So I'm going to invite all of our panelists to weigh in on this question. What are some of the most practical and impactful applications of AI tools you've encountered so far? And the scope here is the software development lifecycle, and we're looking for specific examples, as specific as you can be. Why don't we start with Martin?
Sure. So I got a couple of examples. I'm going to start with one of my favorites, just because I used to code a lot. It's the PR summary that I've seen. So those generative AI tools, they're great at summarizing, taking all the commits that have been done, the comments, and creating a great description so that when you come in and do that review, it's really easy to get in the context of the change that's been done. So when you're looking at the code, you know why it's been done, what it's been done for. I particularly, I've appreciated that I've seen it done very, very well in a couple of different tools. It's a real benefit to the developer as well. Who's actually doing that code review. I think it accelerates that process. That is definitely up there on my examples. I think elsewhere, I think probably one of my other favorites is around security remediation. So I've seen some fabulous tools that essentially say, hey, I've got a security vulnerability from the scan that happened in the build or the whatever. And that kind of like, hey, this is how you can fix it in your code. In context for the developer when they're working on the code, not later. So again, I think it's practical, it's in context, it's assisting, it's making the job easier. And I think they're great examples of where that kind of generative AI is really assisting and helping drive, acceleration and context aware, right? In the moment for the developer. So I'm less worried about the AI context switching than I am about, my engineers context switching.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Ina, I'd like to go to you next, but before I do, I just encourage all of our viewers tuning in, you can definitely submit questions at this time. Ina, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to continue on the same kind of domain that Martin started. So I typically use Gemini, which is kind of the foundational model, but by Google, but can be any other foundational model for tasks that they're good at. For example, if there is an error, explain this to me, right? Like pasting the context and asking generative AI to explain what's going on. And then further, like, how can I fix it? Or adding comments to code. This is something that generative AI is really, really good at. And this is not scary. And if it goes wrong, this is very, very low risk. These are two use cases which are really easy. You don't need a lot of like specialized tooling. In addition, generative AI can be used for further comprehension of like larger code bases or troubleshooting in complex situations.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Fagani, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, if I have to try to be specific, like I can give an example from myself. When I want to write like 1 or 10 lines of codes in a big system, what I have to do first is understand the system, understand the code exists there, understand how it works, understand where it is connected, all these things, right? So that's where this is something else that AI can be helpful with all this, like maybe what just Ina mentioned, pasting the error message and trying to get the context, or referencing to a specific file. That the most of the AI tools out there today can reference in different files, different code files you have, and connect the dots, let's say. So in order to understand the whole system and understand where all these connections, all these requirements coming from, AI can be used. And I used it many times, and I have seen it's really helpful. And I also seen in my team and in other teams that when, developers try to write code using AI, like the ones who understand the AI, the ones who knows the pattern making side of the AI and how it works nowadays, they are very careful when they use AI, when they generate some code or documentation or comment message, anything, or test, they go and they check it line by line. They feel responsible for it and they verify what they're doing. And this helps them to understand the system more. This helps them to ask a question, why this line generated like this? And they have to go ask questions to their team members, or they have to go and look to the system itself, the code base itself, and understand the details. That's where AI becomes, very helpful. Like if you ask me, AI-driven code generation overall might change our way of doing software engineering in next 5-10 years. Maybe we won't need to write all these, complicated steps to program something, and we can just do it like a human interaction. We can just, instead of using like specific code, specific programming language patterns, we can just say something and expect it generates it. Like if we go back and take a look at the history of software engineering, what was first thing there? Like there was machine interactions. Then, low level languages came. Then high level languages came, and we met with compilers. Like nowadays we have compilers, but most of the developers even not thinking about it, right? They just know the programming language, they write it, they see their output or the result, and they continue. Like maybe one day generative AI may take that place, and we won't be thinking about the details of specific programming language. We will just interact like we interact with other humans. We just write the sentence, prompt, and see the result. We might go there, but again, even we have that, we will still need this understanding of our system, understanding of what we are doing and why we are doing it. So that's a like top example from my real experience about it.
Thank you. All right, and Wenji, I'd love to hear what direction you take us with this.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Martin and Afghani and Ina said, and especially how excited AI is nowadays for generating code. But on the other side, I think is it's also good to recognize that as a software engineer or as an engineering manager, usually we spend quite a lot of time doing the technical writings, not only just writing code. And this is a very challenging component of our work, and it has been, getting more and more convenient for us with the generative AI tool coming in. I work at Grammarly, so we do a lot of studies regarding about what kind of things people are writing. What we find out is that the people who are just doing general writings on their laptop, or what they're is very different than what they're writing in the professional space, especially in the technical space. So assume that if I want to write engineering design doc, there will be a lot of jargons in terms of what projects I'm at, what kind of tools I'm using from the internal build. So it's hard for a generative AI tool to jump in without knowing all this context. And usually the companies, when they are trying to, managing the content, the artifacts inside the company, they have particular requirement regarding about the tone of the documents, especially if it's external facing, or the templates they are following regarding about how to write a design doc or how to write a review doc and all that. So Grammarly has another feature called Grammarly Business. It's a membership that you can subscribe to. It's particularly for team and organizations. So we are trying to look from this side, how to help professional writers to write in the professional field. There are a knowledge share database that we're collecting, different jargons, and the owners can define their own jargon. So the entire system will run with this knowledge in their own mind. So you can imagine this definitely will help with just a general AI tools that ask you to put in the context every time.
Thank you. I think that we received like a broad spectrum of responses for the impactful applications of these tools, ranging from code commenting, troubleshooting and code comprehension, to writing assistance, and even honing a specific skill set, doing things like pull requests review, and definitely digging into some of the more enterprise use cases of understanding how developers are working with AI and what elements of the process are actually being sped up. So that's very encouraging to hear even at this stage. So I'd like to take us to our audience questions at this time, and I'm going to dig into Justin's question. It talks about the biggest fear, one of the biggest fear-mongering ideas running around is this idea of generative AI being used to replace engineers. And I think that this is something that remains top of mind for engineers. So I'd love to get us started by having Fagani and perhaps Ina weighing in on this question.
Yeah, maybe I can go first. Yeah, I will repeat myself on two aspects. So what I mentioned while we were talking is the engineering work, the software development work, all parts of it, like infrastructure engineering, QA, all these things. So these are way more bigger things than generating something, generating code or generating documentation or so. Like, it's the easiest part of it. Again, what we do, we have to work as a team together. We have to understand our business needs, and we have to put solutions to address those. And we have to be agile enough to change, to respond to customer needs, etc. So even we have assistants, everything there, like, again, one day generative AI might replace the compilers, might be another abstraction level for us. But still, these decisions, working as a team, delivering the requirement, turning business requirements into a technological solution, still will be a requirement, and still will be the biggest and hardest part of the engineering work. So when I look from this perspective, I believe, this like fear mongering is not realistic, how to say. Like we might change our approach, but the requirements from engineering, requirements from people to do the engineering work, turn business requirements into technological solutions still will be there. The way we are doing it might change. So that's how I see it.
Thank you, Ina.
Yeah, so I think I'm more optimistic, or maybe pessimistic. I don't know how you want to frame it, but I actually, looking at the evolution of generative AI code generation models from early 2023 to today, I can say that the quality is going up very, very fast. Things that you need to be like a true believer, early in 2023, today, the outcomes are actually really good. You can say as a junior developer or like average developer. So I actually think that we are not far from generative AI switching for some use cases from assistive to an actual, code that can be submitted. And we see, lots of startups, right? Lots of companies producing agents, which is something we didn't talk about yet, which can take an issue in production, analyze the logs, et cetera, and automatically create a PR with code and everything. So today, an engineer will have to review and decide in or out. But I actually think that not far the future where it's going to go to production without a person, looking at it. I do want to touch on an area where I think we're pretty far from actually like full adoption of generative AI across the board. And that is something that was brought up multiple times, the secure AI frameworks. Because generative AI models, they tap into our company's data or code, which may be as should be as protected as data. And that is especially scary with the adaptive manner of the way generative AI is evolving, with lots of companies evolving very, very fast. Generative AI of last week is not generative AI of this week. And the interconnectedness, you have to use like many different tools in conjunction, and it's really scary because your data or your code can be now flowing to these third-party companies. And I just want to recommend a few techniques of how do you securely use AI to maybe in the future enable it, be completely independent. So first, if you want to build or adopt a new model or a model that is compatible with your company, bring the model to the data rather than sending your data or your code to any third-party provider. And then also making sure that whatever data or code you're sharing with these providers is not what the model is going to be trained on. So kind of sandbox the LLM. And the third one is to control the access to whatever you build on your company's data or code.
Definitely. Thank you both for weighing in on that. That's super helpful. I'm sure Justin appreciates the response. Why don't we go now to one of our anonymous questions? We've just adopted GitHub Copilot. We're quickly being asked to obtain stats on usage, adoption, and commits, and this is more difficult. This definitely comes down to expectations of increased productivity versus ROI, and what tips does the panel have? So Martin, can you start us off here?
Sure. This is actually a common one that comes up, and it kind of extends right back to the first question about saying it's, you need to extend and think about how you're going to do it, because what you really need for that is the baseline of that. So, actually, before you were using Copilot, how many, features were delivered by a team, how many commits were happening, how many PRs were happening, how long did they take, how many tests were happening, and there is absolutely tools out there that can help you gather all that information, that can, kind of, if you like, from a top level, the DORA type metrics and those flow type metrics that you can get from kind of engineering insights types of tools. They can absolutely give you that data and actually help you understand where you're getting the value and what that return on investment is. Am I getting a 10% increase? Am I getting a 20% increase? Is it actually stuck, right? Because I'm getting more code and commits done, but actually I'm deploying less because testing is blocked. So, actually kind of having those companion tools that allow you to measure, that allow you to do that is almost critical to being able to show that return on investment.
Awesome. Thank you for weighing in, Martin. I want to pass a few questions to Wenji. Let's see how good I am at combining these two questions. But Wenji, we have a few questions here about people being interested in where to find research on the use of AI in the software development lifecycle. Can it help teams with Agile or any other process? And then we have another question from Ryan, who's interested in understanding your work with internally installed LLMs as opposed to external services. So putting a lot on you. Let's see how we do.
No problem. I'm happy that there are some, interest from the audience knowing more about the technical details. The first one is where to find materials to understand what's going on in the GenAI tool in the software development field. I would say using the GenAI tool for that. So I don't know how often you use like ChatGPT, or I personally also like to use Perplexity AI, where they're able to search online and finding all the existing material and summarizing it. So if you have any questions, just send it there. They will probably pull some materials from the web that's related to it. And I use that a lot for me to get answers from any kind of questions, including finding tools. And in terms of, if you want to know more about the cutting edge state of the art studies that happens, usually what I do is I go to Google Scholar to search for like published papers in the recent years. And the papers that publish in the top tier conferences and by a more well-known established institutes, research lab is usually pretty representative, and also decide on depending on how many citations there are. So the more citations are, the more changes they are making to the more front end studies in the field. And there's also quite a lot of communities and meetups that happening regarding about helping software engineers to grow, and the GenAI tool has been something everybody talk about. So I think it also can be a good place for us to exchange information and learn from each other. The second question is, external API calls for closed source LM or internally trained LMs. So I think when I was discussing this with many other companies, I realized that unless privacy and is a super important thing that you don't want to put any risk on, usually we'll start exploring things using the external LM first, because the cost is much lower and it's much faster for us to get the ball rolling and see how things are working. So the POCs or the early stage of launch, we normally use this prompting plus external LM solutions. But there are a couple of issues associated with that. The one is what I mentioned already, cost is by token. So if there's so many members that sign up for your tools and you're giving it to the external users, then you are bearing a lot of costs associated with it. The second one is the latency issue. So right now, even though there's a lot of active works being happened in terms of speeding up things, API call is still pretty slow when you talk about having real-time responses. So then is the time for us to do internal explorations, especially again if you want to consider about data privacies. But the people who knows how to do fine-tuning or how to even train a foundation model is rare people in the market right now. Everybody wants people like that. So I do find that it's hard to hire people who already obtain those knowledges. A lot of the ML people are currently still learning the recipe in terms of how to do proper fine-tuning and foundation model training. But what I know is that there are some companies like Microsoft Azure and all that, they now have APIs allowing you to do fine-tuning. So all you have to do is to prepare your data, sending that data to them. They will handling the fine-tuning for you, and then giving the API back as the fine-tuned model for you to call. So maybe there are some middle grounds that we can explore if you don't think that the technical expertise or skill-wise is ready for your company to explore your own internal explorations. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Wenji. I think you handled that extremely well. We have a ton of questions coming in and we won't be able to address all of them live, but we will be moving these questions over to Slack. We will be in the continuous learning channel. I'll wrap us up now. Thanks everyone for joining us today. If you would like to review this recording, you will be alerted once it's posted to the Lead Dev platform. You heard a great discussion from our esteemed panelists, and we appreciate that you took the time to spend some of your day with us. Thank you all.